Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rochalina.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast is brought to you by Holland, Harlan Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland, Harlan Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. I'm joined today by David Harkin. David is the founder of 8billionideas, an organisation that exists to give every student the skills and belief to change the world by teaching them what they don't get to learn in school. What's unique about David is how his own life experience has made him so passionate about embracing a forward-thinking approach to children's education. And be sure to listen to the end, where David shares with us why he made the leap from a successful career in the corporate world to become an entrepreneur. So whether you're interested in knowing more about the future of education, or would like to know more about what it takes to run a successful independent business, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. Welcome, David Harkin, to the Inside Kingston Podcast. David, I'm really excited about this conversation because as a father of two preschool children myself, I find it fascinating to think about what the future of education could potentially offer them. And therefore, I think that myself and our listeners can learn a lot from your expertise in this area. But to kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay. So David, where did you grow up?
So thank you. Absolutely a pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. Where did I grow up? I actually grew up in Kent, not in the borough. I grew up in Sevenoaks. I went to school in Tunbridge Wells, so I had to get the bus every single day, which was a nightmare. I spent about 2 hours a day on the bus. So that's where I grew up. That was my part of the world. And then I went to university up in Sheffield, lived in Manchester for a bit before coming back down to London, and actually moved to Surbiton and haven't left it. Surbiton was a hidden gem when I moved in about 10 years ago and loved the area. And that's where we started the business from. Absolutely.
Well, I know Kent is considered the Garden of England, and I know that because I think it rains a lot over there too. That's why it's so green. but Surbiton is just as beautiful, if nothing else. You mentioned university there, David, that you went to Sheffield. What did you study?
I studied history. It wasn't when I was at school, I always had a philosophy of pick what you enjoy. So when I was picking my GCSEs and A-levels, and when I was deciding that I wanted to go to university, history wouldn't naturally be the most obvious choice for someone who's dyslexic to go do a lot of writing and essays. But I loved it. And I loved it mainly because I just enjoyed about reading the past. And I was lucky in my third and final year, I studied British secret history. So it was all about the MI5 and MI6. So just reading up about spies. So it didn't really feel like a degree. It just felt like I was reading up on stuff that I enjoyed. And then from there, I went on and worked for IBM. And it was I remember sitting down in the library at Sheffield University and trying to work out what I wanted to do next. And I thought I'd use a little bit of logic. And I went and so I thought, I'm going to go work for a big company and do a big, important job. But where to start? I went and got the Forbes 100 list. I crossed off all the companies I thought were boring. And there was one sector which was crying out, which was left, which was kind of technology, which I thought, okay, I could go work in that space. And then I did the same from a business organization. I thought, what could I be good at in an organization? What could I add value? And for me, kind of professional selling kind of jumped out. So then I worked out that morning that I was going to go be a professional seller for a big tech firm. And that's what I did before becoming an entrepreneur.
That's very cool. And bringing this conversation a little bit more to the present, could you tell us about your business organization today?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it started off as a group of friends talking and coming up with ideas. It was fun, thoughtful, creative ideas. It was a bank holiday Sunday. We actually were celebrating a friend's birthday. We were actually up towards Wandsworth for the day in the ship. I don't know if some of the listeners might have popped in there in the past, but we were coming up with ideas. And I said to one of my friends, "Isn't it crazy? We come up with ideas all the time, but we don't do anything about them." And I said, why don't we create an organization? And at the time, it was called 7 billion ideas. So the planet's population was passing 7 billion, but let's go create an organization called 7 billion ideas, which is about inspiring action and about getting people to do something about their ideas. We then jumped into education, really pushing the topic of entrepreneurship in education from 4 to 18-year-olds. One thing led to another, and within 5 or 6 years, we suddenly were working in 500 schools around the world, 100,000 students delivering course programs, competitions. In the last year, since the beginning of this year, we've become 8 billion ideas. So effectively what we were pre-COVID was a professional services company in education. And then what we've done since then is become 8 billion ideas, which now exists to give every single student skills and belief to go change the world. And we're doing that online with experiences, courses, videos, and programs for students all around the world. So it's been a big journey. And I can tell you more about particularly the last 3 or 4 months, because it has been a roller coaster being a business owner, not just the last 3 or 4 months, the last 12 months in particular.
David, that's amazing. And there's so many threads in there that I want to pull out with you throughout this conversation. And I want to begin with the thing that actually makes you talking about this so valid in my eyes, which is you yourself made the leap from what, of course, was a successful career in the corporate world to becoming an entrepreneur. In other words, having an idea and actually acting upon it. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and how that journey has been for what now is 8 billion ideas?
Yeah, you're right. Look, I was on the director's path in the business that I was working at. I was working at IBM. I absolutely loved my time there, without a shadow of doubt. We've got incredibly strong ties there. But when we came up with the concept for what was 7 billion ideas at the beginning, the truth is I just couldn't let it drop. I was thinking about it when I was running, in the bath, on the way to work, in the gaps between meetings. And I just knew I had this kind of responsibility to myself to go give it a shot. It was really when we went into schools for the first time. So the concept was about connecting people with their own ideas. Let's start with kids and go in and run a few assemblies and see if they kind of get our concept. And we did what we called a Think Big, Dream Big assembly, which was all about trying to encourage students within 20 minutes to come up with their own idea that could change the world. And when we did our first assembly and I could see the children laughing, interacting, coming up with some awesome stuff, I was like, well, this is me, right? This is where I need to be. I was always passionate about education, but that's when we really made the decision to build that. The build around the business and education company, which was inspiring students. And also when I realized that the whole topic of entrepreneurship in education wasn't really being taught, despite 15% of the working population in the United Kingdom being self-employed and schools producing more entrepreneurs than any other profession. Nobody was talking about entrepreneurship. So we made it we took that kind of mantle forward and started spreading it in multi-academy trusts, independent schools, young offenders units, the whole spectrum of education. And it's taken 5 or 6 years to build up that brand, that credibility, that experience. But it's been a huge amount of fun, and it's now given us that voice really in the sector for people now listening to us about what should be happening next, because we've kind of pushed schools into where they need to be, particularly with that topic of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and this is for me what's fascinating, as I said at the top of the show, as a father of 2 young children myself, and I know you are too, because if we just take a step back and look at the sort of educational system as a whole for school-age children, I think the biggest criticism I hear, at least when I talk about this with my mates, let's say, so it's anecdotal, is that the educational system for our children today was designed for children in the industrial age. And therefore, it's becoming very quickly not fit for purpose for the world that we're building and living in today. Do you think, like from your experience, that's a valid criticism? And do you have any comment on what could be done to improve that situation?
Yeah, I think it's really, I have 3 hats, right? I've come from a corporate space. I'm an entrepreneur which employs people, and and my business works in education. So I see it from every side. I see what the big businesses want. I see what the startup community want, and I have great sympathy for what's happening in our schools. Our schools are overburdened. We ask way too much of. Our expectations of the schools are just way too much. So much happens. And when you get into a school, you realize how much emotion happens in one building. You've got kids, you've got parents, you've got teachers, you've got the whole lot going on. You've got focus on examinations and targets and Ofsted and so on and so on. When really we just need to change the target a little bit about why school exists. And also there's responsibility outside of school for our parents, our media, elsewhere, because the child is only at school for 15% of their waking hours. So if I was in charge right now, there are over 1 million people working in education. So sometimes I like to think about this. What would I do, right? If 1.3 million people in the United Kingdom is quite an extraordinary amount of people. Well, firstly, I would lower the burdens. I think school's purpose is about giving a child a sense of community, sense of belonging, friendships, key knowledge, right? That is more than enough, okay, for a school to really concentrate on. So that's one thing. Secondly, I would point the curriculum in a much more realistic place for the 21st century. We have seen industries destroyed in the last year, industries redefined, industries created. More likely a child will be self-employed than employed. So we've got to change what they are learning. We do, but doesn't have to be a revolution. It needs to be an evolution of what's going on in the national curriculum here in the United Kingdom. I would also invest heavily in more passion-led departments. Career departments have one person in a school, if they're lucky, with just their window and view of the world, and they are directing and coaching young children. I would have 10, 15, 20 people helping children towards finding their passions when they're in school. My wishes, and I'm sure for your kids, look, I don't expect them when they're 16 or 18 necessarily to know specifically what they want to do when they leave school. But what I do expect is that I would expect to speak to my boys when they're older and go, what are you passionate about? And I would expect them to say, I'm passionate about X, Y, and Z. If you can have that conversation with a young person, then you can direct them properly with the pathways for their careers to ultimately go and be happy. A lot of young people still have absolutely no idea what they're passionate about when they're leaving school, which to me isn't acceptable. So I could talk about this. I'm involved in the FED, which is the Foundation of Education and Development, about the long-term vision for education. I think that's where we need to start. What do we want to achieve? We should be aiming to have world-class schools. Every school should be a world-class school in the United Kingdom. It should be producing passionate young people who go and lead passion-led careers. If you do that and someone ends up being in a career which they're passionate about, their work is going to be better, they're going to be more productive, and we end up having world-class businesses too. So you've got to work back and you've got to start much younger. This has got to feed beautifully from reception up until year 13 in our schools in the UK and around the world.
Yeah, and I love that, the way you describe that, David, because for me, it doesn't miss out the actual exam-focused part of things when that is the child's passion. And what I mean by that is I always challenge myself with the concept of, you know what, I don't want the flight tower controller at Heathrow to be creative. I want them to be as systematic as they can be to ensure those planes are leaving and landing accordingly. However, what you mentioned there doesn't exclude that person at all. In fact, it promotes curiosity, it promotes creativity, it promotes giving different children the opportunity to be exposed to different roles, to then find the pathway, as you said, which might be more of a numerical pathway, more of a creative, artistic pathway, to become the people that, well, one, they want to be, and two, the country needs for us to keep moving forward. So I really like the way you're right. Look,
a lot of people are talking about the abolishment of examinations. I don't agree with that. Also I think examinations are good for a person in their kind of, focus, that feeling of nerves, that working towards something, that sense of achievement, or indeed failure to build yourself back up on again. What I believe, though, there could be, maybe we don't have to do as many. So when a child is encouraged to do their 9 or 10 GCSEs, maybe 6 or 7 are enough. could we not have a child of that age group who's got 6 or 7 key GCSEs and in that time has led a number of key projects? Okay. So when I'm talking to a young person who might be a little bit more creative, I know they've got their key knowledge because they've gone through that, but I'm really interested about the projects that they've been involved in or the businesses that they've started at school. But then equally for that person in that flight control room, we want them to be good at X, Y, and Z, but they're going to want to do 10 GCSEs because that's in their personal goals. So we've got to stop having, schools right now are basically coffee shops serving one drink, right? That's what a school is right now. You walk in and you get the same, no matter who you are, where you are. Everybody likes their coffee or their tea or their cappuccino or whatever it is slightly different. If they want 2 sugars, bit of chocolate on top, that's what the education system needs to be, really. It needs to be personalized for each of the 8 million people in schools, right? And people look at that and go, that's not achievable, David, you're living in a pipe. No, it is achievable if we listen and understand the young person a little bit better. We have 1.3 million people in this sector working. There are a lot of brains in there, okay, and which can support these 8 million kids. And we just got to be a little bit brave, a little bit flexible in the way that we do things. Stop being defensive. There are a lot of defensive people in in different parts of the sector as well, and outside of the sector has to understand. You don't know what happens in schools. It's hard. They're busy places as well. So we've got to stop pointing the gun, stop being defensive, do the right things for children, have a long-term vision. That's all we really need to do.
Yeah, I like that a lot. David, for our listeners who are interested in knowing a little bit more about 8 billion ideas, could you just simplify it for us and give us an example of like a service you offer and how that might benefit the student?
Yeah, for sure. So what effectively happened with our transition last year was pre-COVID, all our work was going and deliver courses which parents were either paying for in the holidays, weekends, or schools were teaching entrepreneurship in really cool, fun, different ways. When COVID hit, technically, I realized I was running an events company in education because we couldn't go and do all the work that we had done before. I mean, it was crazy, to be honest. We were dragging people from airports who were coming back from schools from the Middle East and out in Asia and having to, head teachers would call me. I remember Armageddon. I was sitting in Bosco in Surbiton and I was with my EA and my phone was buzzing with cancellations. I was like, this is not what a business owner wants right now. I was about to sign a lease of a 40-seater office in town. And something told me not to do it at that particular point, which was good. But then, so basically, within that 2-week period, we had to go, right, we need to completely forget what we've ever done before. We can't run the business off hope and just assume that we're going to get back in the summer, which we obviously never could do. So what we did was decided to think about new problems and new opportunities in the sector. There was this drive to go online. We wanted to go into that space quicker and at a different level, right? So the first thing that we did was we know entrepreneurship, how are we going to do it online? Kids are in lockdown. So we created a course called Home Hack, which was about kids working on inventions to solve problems in their home. And it was really cool. So they were coming up with great ideas. They were prototyping and literally the call to action was get what you can get from the house, Lego, cardboard, plastic, build your inventions. And we had so much fun, but we realized we were really good at it. And the reason why we got better was because we focused on our NPS score, the Net Promoter Score, which is how highly likely is that young child going to go and promote us to another child. And as the year went on, we ended up doing that course in 44 countries around the world in the summer, all from our offices in Surbiton and locally, which was really, really cool. We had kids tuning in from literally all over the world. And as the year went on, we said, right, what are we going to do now? We've learned a huge amount from this. That's when we made a flip to become 8 billion ideas. And we made a commitment to now be a 24/7 educational company, offering experiences around the topic of entrepreneurship, career education, skills for the future every single day through our platform with our courses and our projects as well for students to endeavor. So effectively what it allows is a parent to sign up a child and come and learn with 8 billion ideas. So that's what we've been working on. And we had to go raise a huge amount of capital quite quickly to make that happen because platform content and detailing the world is quite an expensive process.
Absolutely. And I love the way the many previous conversations we've had over these last 12 to 14 months has been about business owners of all shapes and sizes, small one-man bands, all the way to organizations like yours, David, having to pivot, having to sort of have their ear to the ground, understand what sort of tremors, what sort of thing is happening, and go, okay, I think I need to go this way. And then, as you said, doubling down on going that particular way. And it seems to me like you guys have hit a really interesting vein that, in fact, creates a service that complements everything we spoke about, the good, the bad, and the ugly of the school system as it stands at the moment. And I think you and I both focused, and especially you with your experience, there's a lot of good that the schools do. Complementing that with a service like yours just improves the child's chances of finding that thing you mentioned, finding that thing they're passionate about, and then moving forward on that pathway.
That's exactly it. I mean, we're solving a problem, where, in my vision, that a child can go to two schools. They can go to their physical school and their virtual school with us. Why can't they? But, just picking up on your point, I think it's really, I salute, I had goosebumps the other day walking down the high street and seeing the shops reopen again, because I know what it's, obviously a business owner. It doesn't matter if you employ one person, 10 people, whatever it might be. It was utterly, it's been a horrific year at times for business owners. People forget behind a business is an individual who is tearing their hair out, going grey, just going, what are we going to do? And I think March last year, for a lot of business owners out there, and for me personally, it felt like I was being punched in the face, the back, the stomach, my legs, and I couldn't see who was punching for me, and there was absolutely no reason for it. And, I'll be honest, it was some of the darkest, most challenging days of my life. You're kind of going, I've given up my corporate career, I've remortgaged the house, and now this is all being torn apart for no reason out of my control. I can accept bad decision making, but that was hard. And I'm not the only business owner who felt like that. And for many, unfortunately, businesses collapsed, and it's just not fair, right? For us, though, there was a way out that we could see. It took, I remember slapping myself in the face at 3 a.m. one Tuesday, went downstairs, wrote down 4 words on my pad, which was pretty much protect, opportunity, reflect and bounce, protect the business at all costs, seek new opportunity. There would be an opportunity to reflect on what we did and then plan to bounce back, which was 8 billion ideas. And I'm hoping in 5 to 10 years' time, I'm actually going to look back and think it's probably the best thing that ever happened to the business. Doesn't mean it was fun at the time. With a 2 and a 4-year-old going nuts at home, but I'm hoping it's going to be, look back and see it was the best thing that ever happened to us.
And you know what, David, the listeners are going to, of course, completely understand what you're saying, because you're not alone. And it's great to use this platform, which is the Inside Kingston podcast, to just show other people none of us are alone in our own way, fighting our own battles with our own peculiar ups and downs. Nobody has had it easy this last year. And a lot of people have thankfully been able to pivot and find their way. So it's great to hear that from your side as well. David, let me switch gears on you slightly, if I may. And I want to sort of pick the brains of the business owner, David, at this stage, as you mentioned before, the different hats you wear. So we met through social media. And of course, social media, especially in this last 12 months, we've seen just how powerful it is to become somebody's shop window as such, even for business owners, small one-man bands who don't have a shop as such. I just wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how you think of using social media to potentially attract new customers and even keep in touch with your existing customers as well.
Yeah, it's you've got to use it. You've got to firstly, which platforms are right for you. You don't have to be tweeting or putting stuff on Facebook, left, right, and center. It's about quality of content is what we try to concentrate on. It's very hard to get things going viral or get surges of followers, but it's not about numbers of followers. It's about quality followers. I think the best place to start is always your own personal brand as a business owner, and remember that there's 2 brands that you've got to build. You as the business owner and the business as well. They come hand in hand, because the 8 billion ideas, it's quickly who's behind it, right? And then people want to hear about it. My tip is really start properly on LinkedIn. And don't take for granted, get a good background photo, take those first few words. People are nosy, right? They always like reading up on people, scanning through profiles, get key numbers out there, work on your personal brand first before you really attack the business brand. And when you come to the business brand, you've got to get that. I mean, we're sometimes bad at it, pushing product too much rather than our kind of positioning. But this week, for example, when we really just concentrated on positioning, things went nuts for us for the first time, I'd say, in a good number of years. We did a piece of research about what 1,000 parents think right now, about what they wish they learned at school, some of their hopes. It was fascinating, but what ended up happening was it got picked up by BBC News, ITV, Fox News as well, which out in the States, and was featured, and we just commented, right, which was really cool for us, but it kind of takes us where we want to be. We are thought leaders. We've got an opinion on stuff, but you got to make sure you don't fall into the trap of just trying to sell online. You know, we of course we've done that. Everybody's done that. It's just getting that good balance of telling people why you're experts, giving them information, giving them really interesting stuff they can interact with. And then 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 parts of your messaging is just reminding them that you've got a service which they could benefit from. Yeah,
I like that a lot. David, what are some of the key business lessons that you've learned throughout your life?
I would say the biggest one I've the mentality that a leader brings to their organization, and their organization can be 1 or 2 people or 100 people, whatever, or 1,000 people, whatever it might be. But the mentality that you bring to your organization is the biggest asset that you can bring. Ultimately, your mentality kind of defines the pace, the quality, the speed, the culture of the business, and ultimately the quality of the work. And, you know, I tell my team, I want us to be world-class in everything we do. We're not there yet, but why should we not aspire to do that? So I think the biggest thing I've learned is, you know, get your mentality right and bring it into the business. I think closely second, I would say lots of small things done well do add up and have a big impact. Don't ever overlook the tiny ideas. Sometimes it's quick just to look for the big wins, but the tiny ideas do count. And lastly, particularly if you are in a leadership position, you need to remember that attitude is key, but it's closely linked to kind of an ongoing performance, if that makes sense. I noticed when I was walking into our offices over the last couple of years ago that my mood could have a kind of ripple across the business. If I was in a good mood, people could be in a good mood. If I was on fire, they could be on fire. If I was a bit snappy because Toby and Harry, my boys, are up all night, it could have that kind of negative ripple effect across the business as well. So I learned that, you know, my job as a leader was set the strategy, be on top of the business, inspire people. And therefore, when I go and see the team, interact with them, speak on Zoom, go into the office, you know, whatever kind of bad night's sleep I had or what was going on, I kind of had to get into an element of performance mode, because there was no point me not doing that. Because if I didn't do that, what would happen is that I could have a negative ripple across the team. So biggest lessons there, I would say, is that mentality is important. The small things really do count. But the more and more your business builds, you've got to keep your attitude in check, because you definitely become more of a performer. I think is the wrong term, but you definitely are an agent for inspiring on a day-to-day basis, and that is your job, right? At the end of the day, there's no point taking people down with you if you're feeling in a bad mood. You've got to build people up to drive them, keep them happy, drive productivity, and drive a better product into the world.
Yeah, I like that a lot. When you look back at your career journey to date, what are you most proud of?
Oh, great question. You know, I'm proud of, you know, I feel very blessed that I've ended up, you know, the business that we've got so closely linked to my passions, my why as an individual. There's so many things that I'm proud of. You know, I look at I'd say the thing that I look at now is when we kind of have our weekly teams call, and I look at that team and just go, wow, this is a remarkable team that we've built, hired, developed, trained, you know, kept over the years, and then see their output and the work. And it kind of all comes back to when a parent or a child emails us or gets in contact to say, thank you, we've inspired them. It's a combination of, you know, years of hard work, sacrifices, and you go, well, that's why we keep doing it. So lots of things make me very proud, the team for sure. But when we see the output of our work, and particularly a young child, I mean, I know we're on a podcast, you can see some of the pictures around me when they're in child enjoying what we've created. I mean, you know, it's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what next for you and your business? Are there any projects in the pipeline that you can tell us about?
Yeah, we're very excited now. 8 billion ideas, full steam ahead. We've just launched our 10 to 14 year offering for students to join us every day of the week and take part in our experiences. We're about to launch our 15 to 18, what we're going to be doing very specifically for those students in the future. So we're going to be running accelerators and incubators for kids over the summer, which is pretty cool. We're being clearer about how we're going to help schools all around the world. But we're very excited to launch our adult education program as well. We always get, what are you doing for adults? What do you do here? And, my kids love this. What about me? So we're like, okay, we're ready to rock and roll for you now. So there's going to be that coming very shortly. But we're really looking forward to driving forward. And then personally for me, I'm just trying to get a few people listening to the longer term changes. I don't believe it needs to be too complicated. I think have a vision for the future. So this is where we are now. This is where we want to get that vision nice and clear. Then you can work out the how. We don't have to overcomplicate things, which often we do in education / politics, because there's a lot of politics, obviously, within the sector.
Exciting times ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And then trying to continue to be a dad as well. My boys, Toby, are 2 and 4. How old are your 2 kids today?
They're 5 and 3. Yeah. So my little girl has just started reception this year. Looking forward to year 1, and then things really get interesting, I guess, from everything we've been speaking about here. So I'm very keen to be getting them involved as they sort of progress in their education with those outside of formal schooling activities, as you said, just to make sure their world is as open as possible to them finding that pathway that really triggers something in them and makes them want to go down it, with fire in their belly as such. So that's really, really cool.
The biggest tip, if I had to give one tip to any parent listeners out there who've got kids who kind of come up with cool, crazy, bonkers ideas, just get stuck in with them. Just enjoy how crazy their imagination is. If you know it's not going to work, doesn't matter. Just let them explore it. Children are brilliant. As young as 3, 4, 5, their imaginations are just on fire. And as a society, we squash imagination, and we've got to stop it. So just get really, really excited with them, and just get carried away. You can create some really cool things with a cardboard box, right?
Absolutely.
And when kids do that, it's quite cool. So that's the best thing parents can do, really, I think, for their kids.
Yeah. Funnily enough, that's the tip I give to friends of mine who are just having children now. I say, look, you're going to realize something. You're not going to believe me right now, but you're going to realize something very quickly. Your kids prefer to have the cardboard box and spend time with you than actually the toy that comes inside the cardboard box. You don't need to believe me right now, but just trust me on it and you'll see it play out. And they see it play out. So there we go. David, as we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick fire questions that our listeners are always interested in. So what do you do to relax outside of the office?
Great question. It's hard at the moment. I ask myself that regularly. Well, no, at the moment, it's because we have gone 24/7. I do actually find it you just in your dreams, in your sleep all the time. So I'd say it's not the most relaxing thing, but the stress reliever thing for me is running. I try and run about 40K a week now, which is just over 5K, well, 5.5K a day or whatever it might be. So I run, and when in a pre-COVID world, it would be going to Lord's to watch a bit of cricket, but hopefully we can do that a bit this summer at some point.
Absolutely. And are there any books that you've recently read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
The biggest book I would recommend actually is The Power of... It's one I've referred to quite a lot this week. So it's one I read last year, actually. But this book is amazing. The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. Love the book. Tells you, particularly for me who works in the kind of education space, just the importance of trying to create moments, because for young people or in your product or service. Because if you think back to your time at school, there's only a handful of things you really, really remember. Obviously, inspirational teacher, great assembly, whatever it might be. But they're all moments, but we can definitely create them in more of our products and services. So that's what we really try to focus on. So Power of Moments, and also Stephen Johnson, Where Good Ideas Come From. Love that book.
I like those. That's really cool. I'm going to get that one on my to-read list. And are there any movies or TV shows that you've recently watched that you'd recommend to our listeners?
It's a kids one, right? Okay, I'll recommend one kids one because we've gone through, as I'm sure many parents have, through. It's probably not what everybody recommends, but through so much on the television. But there was a film on Netflix called Wonder Park, which caught my attention, because it was about a little girl who had an imagination, and she built up a theme park in her head. And it was a beautiful little film, and it really inspired my kids. So my kid Toby then started to create Tobyland, right, from it. And it's exactly the type of film I think should be on TV for young children, because it was a lovely story, a little bit dramatic, so on and so on, to capture their imagination. But it was about imagination and creativity. So it's probably not one for the adults, but it's one for the kids. And then I tried now just to tune in and watch a bit of comedy or whatever it might be on when I do sit down on the sofa, just to try and relax and switch off a little bit from the day.
Very cool. And finally, where can people go to find out more about you and your business?
Well, please connect on LinkedIn to David J. Harkin. We're local. We employ a lot of people from the area as well. Definitely encourage that business owners. We've got a lot of great talent in the region, a lot of young, great talent as well. But connect on LinkedIn, Twitter at David J. Harkin, and go to 8billionideas.com to learn a little bit more about what we do. But I'd love to speak to anybody who's listened to this, found it of interest, and either wants to have a chat on Zoom or hopefully meet for a coffee at some point.
And for the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure that I add those links to the show notes. David, thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
Thank you ever so much for having me. I hope you have a great day, and all your listeners too.
Thank you.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.